Good evening. Good evening. My name is Emily Mead. I am Director of Philanthropy for the New Bedford Whaling Museum, and it is my distinct pleasure to welcome you tonight to the second lecture in our 2023 Sailors Series. Many of you who have attended in the past know that this is a beloved museum tradition that presents a wide variety of experiences and adventures by individuals with lifelong commitments to sailing, boats, and the sea. So I thank you for joining us this evening. The New Bedford Whaling Museum Sailors Series is made possible by Ruth and Hope Atkinson, and it's also supported in part by the Samuel D. Rositsky Lecture Fund. We are grateful also to our 2023 Sailors Series supporters, Barden's Boat Yard and Babbitt Steam Specialty Company. Of course, we're grateful to all of you for being here tonight, especially those of you who are members. If you're not a member, it's not too late to join. We have pamphlets at the front, and you can sign up online as soon as you get home. Members do enjoy, among many other benefits, 50% off all ticketed programs at the museum. So I would encourage you to join and stay ahead of the news at the museum. As I mentioned, it is my distinct pleasure this evening to welcome Kimberly Ward and Michael and Allie. Kimberly Ward is a traveler, an adventurer, and a gardener, but not a sailor, she says, not a sailor. Yet in 2014, she and her husband Michael and their then 10-year-old daughter Allie took off. They moved aboard their 34-foot boat for 2 years and sailed from Massachusetts to Grenada and back after 2 full years of planning. Crew of 3, How Bold Dreams and Detailed Plans Launched Our Family's Sailing Adventure is her recently published book. And it's the story of their decision to go, the 2 years that they spent planning to make it work, and the first several months that they lived aboard. So originally from Northern Virginia, Kimberly lives and works out of her home here on the South Coast with her husband and a purportedly crazy coonhound. So it is my pleasure to welcome Kimberly to the stage. She'll make some remarks, and then we'll do a Q&A with Michael and Allie afterwards. Kimberly, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Emily. Good evening. Thank you so much for coming tonight. Welcome to the New Bedford Whaling Museum. If I have to be inside, in addition to libraries and bookstores, this is one of my favorite places to be. Some of you may know that 20 years ago, my husband and I celebrated our wedding here after getting married across the street at the Seamen's Bethel. Very young and earnest 20 years ago. And some of you were even here celebrating our wedding 20 years ago. Thank you. So as I bring your attention to this ridiculously soothing photo of Alley Cat in Flamingo Key in the Bahamas, way down in the Gemintos, which is one of our favorite places. Nobody lives there. It's an uninhabited island. There's nothing there. So I'm hoping that you will do a little exercise with me and humor me for a moment. So close our eyes for a minute. Are they closed? No peeking. So in your mind, look up at the sky and tell me, what color is your perfect blue? Let's add some water. What color is your ocean? Is it more turquoise, like the Bahamas? Or perhaps it's deep midnight blue, or sapphire blue, Or maybe, like the Turks and Caicos, you favor a little bit more green, where it reflects off the clouds. Now picture a boat. Do you have a boat? Did you have one growing up? Did you have one 20 years ago? Picture a boat, and if you've never had a boat, use your creativity and conjure up one in your mind. Now picture yourself on that boat. What do you hear? Do you maybe hear the clink, clink, clink of a halyard slapping against the mast? Maybe you're listening to an egret or an osprey call to its mate. What do you see? Do you see the hint of a sunrise? Or maybe it's the fiery reds and oranges of a sailor's delight sunset. Or a full moon rising from that endless horizon. What do you taste? Are you sipping a cup of coffee, a steaming mug? Or are you holding an ice-cold cocktail? You feel a brisk breeze blowing your hair, cooling your sun-warmed skin. The sting of salt air invites you to take a big, full breath in through your nose. Smell and taste that salt as you breathe in. Slowly exhale through your mouth, maybe with a little sigh. Okay, that was pretty nice. Let's take one more full deep breath all the way in. And a nice, slow, long exhale. Now I invite you to open up your eyes. Does anyone else feel like their blood pressure just went down by about 20 points? So some of the scenes you see up here may be what you envisioned. What I bet you didn't envision was something a little more like this. So let me see a show of hands. Who's ever heard that cruising is fixing your boat in exotic locations? Anyone? I can tell who's sailors out here. So we have a few exotic locations. That's the galley. See the little kitchen sink in there? That's where we're supposed to cook and eat. It's a full-on electrical shop here. Nav station, not a chart in sight, no guidebooks. We've got a lot of plumbing parts. Oh, and that's the salon. Hopefully there's some cushions in there and a table, maybe to homeschool or eat dinner. And so then you get to this fabulous. Looks so relaxing, doesn't it? This photo lies. This one was in the Bohemia River, which is at the northern end of the Chesapeake Bay. And what the thunderstorm that had blown through 20 minutes before this photo was taken was ferocious. The loudest crack of thunder, even as the lightning was flashing. Of course, we were there drinking dark and stormies and didn't have a care in the world. It was 2 or 3 days later, though, that the autopilot was behaving wonky. The wind and depth and speed instruments gone completely. So we had taken in this lovely location a near-miss lightning strike. So once we got to DC, we had to order up all those parts, put them in. Washington, D.C. was a pretty exotic location to be fixing all the electronics. This is one of my favorite pictures from the trip. Not so much my husband, although he was happy on this day. Somewhere around Fort Pierce, Florida, we were ready to pop into a marina for one of the first marina stays and lost our engine with rather loud beep, beep, beeps, multiples of them. And even though we were able to sail the 35 miles down to Fort Pierce, we did have them, we called sea tow and had them tow us into the marina, kind of the towing of shame. into the marina. And this lovely heat exchanger arrived on Christmas Eve, thank heavens, after 3 or 4 wrong parts arrived. I see lots of nodding. I see lots of sailors. You've been here before. I don't know that my mother has heard this story, so here goes, Mom. We almost sank our boat the second week we were in the Bahamas. I don't know if you can tell, but there's water up to my husband's ankles in this photo. We had a hose clamp that failed, and a saltwater washdown pump was gushing. Lots and lots of seawater in. You can see the bilge pump has a little help. Got the salt water off, washed it all off. Thank heavens my husband had done all of the wiring, and you can see it's just below the battery compartment. So we did not lose any batteries. The Bahamas, another rather lovely location to be fixing our boat. This one's great, and the water is truly sapphire. So I'll paint a picture for you. Anybody been to Montserrat? Any Jimmy Buffett? Oh, I see a couple. Any Jimmy Buffett fans out there? I see some. I don't even think I'm going to pretend to sing, but I don't know where I'm going to go when the volcano blows. Jimmy Buffett has had a recording studio in Montserrat, and Soufriere Hills is the volcano that he sang about. And so in honor of Jimmy Buffett, I thought I'd drag up this one. So that volcano blew in 1990 and rendered 2/3 of the island of Montserrat uninhabitable. So we were curious, and when we were leaving, after having toured it on land, we decided we wanted to tour it on boat. And picked up some fishing gear, unintentionally. So in 3 to 4 foot seas, my husband deploys the dinghy, and in something akin to a surgical procedure, I'm kneeling on the back of the boat, carefully handing tools to him as he calls for them. He removes the prop. He removes the fishing gear because we don't want to leave a fisherman without his gear. Removes the fishing gear, leaves it, puts the prop back on. And we did all of this with a police escort. I'm kind of sad I missed the pictures where they're holding their giant guns, wondering what we're doing and questioning us. So it's not all cocktails and sunsets, just in case you're curious. I don't have a picture of the next one, but I always feel like I need to explain it. So the Mona Passage, it's a passage that goes between Dominican Republic and Puerto Rico. It's where the cooler Atlantic meets that warmer Caribbean, so that automatically gives you some good sailing conditions. There's some contours on the seafloor that make it a little bit like an hourglass of funneling water through. Pretty technical sail. We were in a pretty small boat for what we did. And we get to within 20 miles of Boca Raton, Puerto Rico. We're really ready to be there. It's been kind of a rough trip. And we lose an engine. And I know what you're thinking. You're a sailboat. Put your sails up and sail. Well, once you get within 20 miles of an island, that's between you and where the wind is coming from, there is no wind. So my husband, rather expertly, in the middle of the Mona Passage, performed fuel pump bypass surgery. And we arrived into Puerto Rico on wire ties and prayers, literally. I think you can see why there are no pictures of that. So when you were visualizing yourself on the boat, perhaps cruising in some lovely tropical space, did you rent your house out to make the finances work? Or push retirement back 5 or more years? A lot to consider when you're in the middle of it. And how about kids? Do you have any kids with you? Maybe not if you were sipping your cocktails. Allie was only 8 when our someday dream became our plan to go sailing. And she was 10 when we set sail. So we homeschooled her, or rather boat schooled her, for 5th and 6th grades. And we did this without the internet, because there wasn't much, or without planning to have the internet, there wasn't much access. At that point, anyone who knows Starlink, that wasn't even a thought back then. This was nearly 10 years ago. Even smartphones were pretty new back then. So this was our high-tech version. We even turned off our cell phones when we left Florida. This was a sabbatical trip for us, so my husband and I were planning not to work. We had done our savings and our budgeting based on not working while we were on the boat, and so we turned off our cell phones. Be interesting to see when we go cruising again, hopefully starting this winter, what the communication style is. There's some joy in not having any communication, or not much communication. Of course, the rest of the world really wasn't on any sort of a sabbatical, and they didn't join us in the island time. So we still had bills to pay and family to stay in touch with. Occasionally, we weren't very good with that. Not to mention that Allie occasionally had some homeschool projects. So we generally accessed that internet at local establishments. You know, bars. And while we're probably not going to be nominated for Parents of the Year, since we had 10-year-old Allie in tow, it worked. And as I think you'll see in a little bit, I don't think we've wrecked her irrevocably anyway. So this is a group of homeschool kids. We studied volcanoes. There were a lot of volcanoes in the Caribbean. So we studied volcanoes, and this is a group of kids in a bar where they let us make them, set them up to dry, come back and put the next coat of paper mache on and paint them. They let us keep them in the bars. They were really kind of nice to us, actually. And so this is a group of homeschool kids and where we did all of our homeschool. Now, occasionally there were the times where you sipped cocktails and played in the water and did nothing else. And the reality is, there are plenty of stunning sunrises and sunsets when you go cruising. There are pristine white sandy beaches where your footprints are the only ones you see. But cruising is more of a collection of high highs, hard work, and the occasional massive frustration. And just contemplate some of the things that we take for granted. This is laundry day. We're in the family car. Grocery shopping when you're cruising is called provisioning because it is very different. You buy what you can when you can and then find some place on the boat to store it all. So what skills did our crew bring to this adventure? So this is Captain Mike. Michael's superpowers are his sailing skills. He's sailed since he was a child. He's owned boats forever. And he's equal parts mechanic, electrician, plumber, and handyman. He also comes with a fantastic skill that he can stay calm in just about any situation. Allie and I need him. This is Cruiser Kid exercise/entertainment. Allie's superpowers are her sense of humor, her willingness to tackle whatever adventure presents itself, and her love of reading. There's a lot of time for reading. In fact, I'm excited to go cruising again because my to-be-read pile has outpaced any bookcase. And it's the only time my to-be-read pile ever came close to being done. And what about me? I was the first mate. My superpower is my ability to plan. Anyone who knows me knows that. And my ability to create order out of chaos, which is something you need to do in a lot of those situations. I also have quite a good ability to laugh at myself, which was necessary, and unbridled enthusiasm, even when it's born out of naivete. What none of us could really grasp when we were out for 2 years was that we would come home, and we rented out our home, so we moved right back into our house, and we would come out of our home, and we came back home, but we were wholly different people. We had changed. The environment had changed some too. 2 years had passed. This was 2014 through 2016, so an awful lot of time had gone on. Michael had cruised twice before we met, so he wasn't new to this cruising lifestyle. He had taken a boat to the Florida Keys once, and a second time he went to the Bahamas. He and I spent about 6 weeks on a boat cruising up in Nova Scotia right after we were married. And amazingly, we're still married. And then when Allie was 3, kind of 180 degrees from the whole Bahamas scene, we took a 5-month trip across the country. So we had traveled. However, 2 years of living and sailing aboard Alley Cat is more of a lifestyle change than traveling. And when we came home to our old house and our old life, it didn't fit. Allie started junior high a couple weeks after we moved off the boat. It was very loud, it was very structured, and it was very people-y. Not something you hear on the boat or see on the boat at all. However, it also brought us Mr. Ori and Miss Karen, her teachers, Nathan and Danielle. First they were teachers, then they became friends, and now they're family. She first traveled. She took her world experience and what she had learned, and she started to spread her big butterfly wings. She first traveled in 7th grade with Mr. Ori and Miss Karen to the Netherlands and Germany and Poland. In 9th grade, she traveled without us again to England and Scotland, where she found her people and fell in love with the country. And finally, on a COVID-delayed trip, her senior year, she traveled to Ireland and Scotland, confirming that her love for Scotland was true love and not an infatuation. So on Sunday, Allie leaves for her second year of college, and she's studying molecular and cellular biology at the University of Glasgow in Scotland. Warning, if you introduce your children to travel, they travel. Sometimes far, but it also gives us great places to go visit. So with retirement pushed back by at least 5 years and 10 years of schooling for Allie, junior high, high school, and college, left when we got home, and that's what we were planning on working, Michael found a new project in Ohio, and somehow I can't find any pictures of consultant Michael because that is not who he is. So he went to Ohio. He had to wear shoes and long pants. He had to work under fluorescent lights all day long. And his client had no idea where he'd been for the past 2 years, or that his shoes were likely filled with sand, and I know for a fact his brain was filled with some cobwebs. So he came home And I can still remember the spot on the marsh, right over here somewhere, where he said, I don't think I can do this technical consulting for 10 more years. And so, ever enthusiastic, I said, okay, what do you want to do? Plan B. And that, my friends, is how we became our oyster farmers. 3 years ago, Michael was able to leave his full-time consulting job, and he now works full-time on the oyster grant, on our oyster grant in Mattapoisett. He commutes 7 or 8 minutes by boat every day, and though it is physically an awful lot of work, I've never seen him so happy. And that's one of the direct results of coming out of cruising for 2 years, is trying to figure out what matters. What about me? I split my time, a couple of days on this messy site, and then I started writing. And last week, I launched my first book, The Crew of Three: How Bold Dreams and Detailed Plans Launched Our Family's Sailing Adventure. And I launched my first blog, which we've titled Love Us. Allie and I sent postcards home. It was a tip I'd picked up on before one of our trips when she was quite little. Someone said, oh, send postcards home. She'll remember the trip that way. Boy, were we surprised when we got home, and there were more than 300 postcards. So that is the basis of my blog, are to follow the travels more. The book that I've written now is about the planning and how did we get there and what did we do and how did we homeschool, and a lot more of the how we did it. And the blog is much more of the where we did it. And one day, I will write a book that's working title, called Shuckable, about our oyster farming experiences. But there are an awful lot of sailing experiences still left in us. And now I'm delighted to physically introduce you, you've heard their names, physically introduce you to the rest of my crew of three, my husband Michael, and my not 10-year-old daughter. She is now going into her second year of college, Allie. And they're going to join us here on stage, and we are opening it up for questions and answers. Thank you. And I believe there are mics. Yep, I see them up there. They're going to have mics, and if you have questions, it'd be most helpful if you've got a mic so the rest of us can hear, even if we can hear down here on the front. So if you have any questions for Michael or Allie or me, raise your hands up, and we have one over here.
What did you find to be the most challenging aspect of boat schooling?
That's an easy one for me. The transition between mom and daughter to student and teacher was a pretty brutal one. What would you say? You on?
Probably pretty similar. We had some issues with, well, not issues, we had some curriculums that we didn't like that we started with, and we had to switch halfway through, and that was tough trying to get them in the middle of the trip. By the second year, we had everything pretty much figured out, I think.
And by the third year, I was very happy to send her back to school. Any other questions? Oh, I see a couple of hands.
In the picture, you showed that she was with other students when they were doing volcanoes. How did you locate other homeschool children that way?
Oh, that's a great question. The question is, how did we locate other kids? It is a much larger community than you probably realize, the cruising community. And even though everyone doesn't take the same roots places and they don't stay in the same anchorages. There's a general migration, and particularly as we approach, right now we're in hurricane season, and so many insurance carriers have some restrictions about where you can ride out hurricane season. And the particular picture that you saw was down in Grenada, which is at the very southern, and where we were was at the very southern tip of Grenada. There are more than 100 boats?
Oh,
200?
300 or 400 or 500 boats probably spend the winter there, or the hurricane season there.
So there are 500 boats. Maybe what I'm thinking is there are probably like 200 kid boats. But there were 30 kids in our anchorage, and there were multiple anchorages that these folks are spread across. About 30 kids. They ranged in age from 8 to 18. Very much like an old-fashioned neighborhood.
Mike? Oh, sorry.
Yep, sorry, she had a follow-up question. We'll listen to that.
Have you stayed in touch with any of the children that you met along the way?
Yeah, I follow a number of them on social media, and I know my mom does the same with the parents. And every so often, we run across each other. We're kind of scattered all over the place. I think the furthest distance is probably between me and Scotland, and we have some friends in Alaska. But everyone travels all the time, and so we've run across, we recently had some friends who live in Alaska, and they were here in Massachusetts. We came across a bunch of them in New York City a few years ago, and so we run into these people kind of all over the place.
It's a rather mobile community, too.
That was a question.
So the question is, I have a lot of skills, and how did I develop them? Well, you know, I started the boating when I was young and poor, and so I had to do all the work myself, and then I kept it up. And I just, you know, stuff breaks, and if you've got boats, stuff breaks in a boat all the time, and if you fix stuff yourself, then you know how to do it. And for fitting this boat out, I actually needed to do most of the work myself because there was a budget going on. And I had so the one picture where my feet are in the water, I'd redone all that wiring 6 months before, so I was able to immediately know what needed to happen. I could look at it, and we happened to be in a lucky place where I could go buy wires and terminals and whatnot, but just over a lifetime of owning boats and messing around with them. Yeah.
He's also a little, not tooting his own horn, but he reads, he watches YouTubes, he reads. This was a new to us boat. We bought this boat for the trip. We have had boats before, but we bought this boat for the trip and still have it. But he went on to the users group for the Gemini, which is the type of boat that we're on, and pretty well read 10 years worth of posts. And so those are the kind of things that he will do. It's like Malcolm Gladwell's 10,000 hours of mastery. And when you just keep going and keep learning and doing all of those things. So he's put a lot of effort into it that he probably won't share.
But yeah, most boats have an owner's group. And I mean, what I did is I read and I found out all the things that break in my boat, this new boat to us. And then I went trying to figure them out. So when they broke or I preventively did it, I made an online boyfriend, as you'll read about in the book, who's actually sitting right over here, who happens to be local. But yeah, so you just figure it out.
In the back.
Hi. So in terms of budgeting for a 2-year cruise, how did you go about doing that? Is it expensive? Are you guys wealthy? And where do you keep your boat? Where do you keep your boat?
So
Thank you.
there's a lot of ways to go cruising on a boat. So there's a lot of ways to go on the boat. I've done many of them. I haven't done the real wealthy route yet. I don't want to work hard enough to do that, but I started when I was a young man and didn't have a lot of money, so I did it on a shoestring. This trip cost us a lot of money. I mean, we chose to do some things like keep our health insurance going, and if you've bought your own health insurance, you have some concept. So we kept that, we kept our life insurance, we kept our disability, so that like chunked our money. But yeah, I mean, it's, for a 2-year trip like this and to buy the boat and everything is multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars to do that. So no, it's not inexpensive to do. However, there was people spending twice as much money, and there was people spending a quarter of the money that we were at. And everybody had the same anchorage, everybody had the same view. And so there was all kinds of people doing it all kinds of ways. Go now, go soon, go often. There's a,
Go simple, go small, go now.
yes.
And if you, the bottom line is if you want to do it, you'll figure out a way to do it. We rented out our home. It's kind of a big stretch if you think about somebody coming and staying in your house for 2 years. And so that was a concession, at the beginning. Were we ready for that? I don't think so. And when you think about that you're actually going to get to go because of this, then it makes you change your mind a little bit more. One other thing, in the book, I am extraordinarily honest and upfront about the cost, because that is such a great question. How do you do this? It's such a great question, and so I was pretty honest with it about it. And there's one chapter that's called Making the Finances Work, and it's pretty much exactly how we did it.
So there's other costs that aren't money. You have to prioritize it to the top of your life. And we had to do that for 4 years, so that 2 years we were getting ready, and the 2 years we did it. So we gave up all kinds of stuff. Before we left, we gave up traveling. We skipped all kinds of holidays when we were gone. We missed people's birthdays. We missed milestones. We missed all kinds of things. And then, we didn't go out to dinner. When we sat and did our budget, the first thing we did was cross off all kinds of fun things we used to do.
Sushi.
Yeah, and everybody does that in some form or another.
Did you ever have any experiences when you felt unsafe due to other people or pirates?
No, I did not. There was a couple of times I personally was worried. So any of the sailors know you have too much sail up and you're getting close to where you want to go, and you just kind of let it go. Or you're just 100% depower your mainsail. There was a couple times it was blowing like that, but it was under control. But I was on edge, but I didn't let them know. Now my wife is going to tell you that she felt unsafe a couple of times, but I'm going to let her do that.
And this is twofold. One is unsafe because of weather conditions and boating conditions. And yes, I was uncomfortable. My husband was very quick to point out, you are not unsafe, you are uncomfortable. Humongous distinction. I think what you asked, though, was more on you asked about pirates. I think I heard that at the very end. Okay.
And other people.
And other people. The cruising community, again, it's much larger than you think it is, but it is also a very small family. I did not feel unsafe with any of the people we came across. There were some islands. There's a wonderful resource called Noonsite that allows any current issues in places where cruisers go. And it's something that you study and learn about. We skipped the entire island of St. Vincent in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. However, several miles away, Bequia was one of our favorite places. There are a couple of other islands in St. Vincent and the Grenadines that were kind of marked as could be unsafe, but if you read through the details, generally it's when you were out at bars drinking and arriving back to your boat overnight. after dark. Okay, we had a 10-year-old. There wasn't a lot of that. And then we were conscious of that. There were some islands that we only went to. We were happy to skip them, that we only went to because we had buddy boats. When you come into an anchorage, you meet people. One of my people is here. We met Mary in a boat in an anchorage in Washington, D.C., 2 weeks after we set out, and then re-met her again in the Bahamas. Now, Mary was traveling solo with her 6-year-old daughter, who at that point was about 11, so pretty close to Allie's age. But so she'd been out for 5 years. She was pretty experienced then. Traveled loosely with her from the Bahamas all the way down to Grenada. So you form some real solid relationships, and you feel much safer when you go with numbers, both traveling. Now, the Bahamas and Dominican Republic and Puerto Rico, and then all the way down the Eastern Caribbean, not hotbeds for pirate activities. Never say never, but it's just not a place that we felt unsafe in any way.
So we also skipped, I wanted to go to some of the islands off Venezuela, but so Venezuela, when we were there, and then still is just a mess. So you stay away from places that you know about. But by far, the two most dangerous places that we went to were Washington, D.C. and Miami, Florida. Don't kid yourself. By far, yeah.
Oh, I see one in the back. Over here.
When you guys look back at your trip, is there anything that you would change as far as planning, or are you glad that you figured it out the way that you did?
What would I that's a great question. That one kind of stumps me. What would I change for planning? Make plans, but don't plan the outcome. I'm sort of famous for that. I make plans and then get very frustrated when God laughs at me. So have more flexibility. The weather, we haven't even talked about the weather. We haven't talked about food. There's so much we haven't talked about. The weather trumps all, and the weather is what tells you either you stay in an anchorage or you move to the other side of the anchorage, or you go around the corner, or you go or you don't go. And so the weather is what trumps. I think I would have learned that a little earlier.
Yeah, I was going to say that I would have set expectations better about you can't stay till you want to. A lot of times you stay an extra day, you lose 2 weeks because you miss some weather. And so we got better at that as we went along. Of course, when I got better at it, I really got upset because I was making her leave her friends. Because, we got to go now. And so, yeah.
You have to realize that your dreams have a price, and everything has a pro and a con, and just a little bit more of acceptance of what is. I do think I came back with a lot more of that. I see a couple hands, one up in the back. I see 3. There's one in the middle, one in the back, and then one on my right side, so the left side. And the gentleman right here.
Did you encounter any major storms?
No. Part of it was lucky. Part of it was we went times where there weren't storms. We weren't out where the hurricanes were going. Hurricanes can go to Grenada, but we even had a plan for that. We just would have kept going south. We got lucky. The only thunderstorm that really got us was the one she talked about, and we were at anchor. So some of that is just lucky. But it's a pleasure cruise. If it's going to be snotty out, I didn't have a schedule. I didn't have to be anywhere a week from Wednesday, or tomorrow. And so I find I get into more trouble close to shore because I have some commitment for tomorrow or the next day. And so as long as you take it like this, that this is a pleasure cruise and you don't go out when it's bad, and you don't have to.
Now, it's important to note that we were out 2014 for partial hurricane season. All of 2015, however, we were way far down in the southern area of Grenada. And then for a portion of 2016, there were years like Irma and Maria. So part of it is luck, but part of it is not being in the wrong place. All right, I see there's a hand back here, and then up here on the...
Really interesting hearing about your experiences. You mentioned when you came back to land that you were all different people. Is that something you kind of share about, and do you still feel like you have that different mentality or just different habits?
Yeah, I wouldn't own as much as some of it I still do, I guess, because I had it before, like our house. I would have spent more money and had less stuff and done a whole nother trip or two if I could do it over again, like, your whole life. Yeah. Did that answer your question?
And I think my daughter will agree, going to school in Scotland seemed like a reach for an awful lot of people. I know she had people ask her, and I certainly had parents ask me, how can you let her go to Scotland? How could I not? We've introduced her to the world, and that was the place that she felt most comfortable and where she wanted to go to university. My husband and I often said that as we left, she was going to be junior high when we came back, going into 7th grade. And if we had given her the ability to march to her own drum in 7th grade or by 7th grade, what a gift. I don't know if many of you all remember your junior high years. I could have used some little more confidence going into my junior high.
To stay on that tangent a little bit, picking a good time in your life to go out on a boat is important. So if you have kids, believe it or not, when they're younger, they're easier on a boat. When they're older, they're harder. Once she hit 12, being around her friends was way more important than anything else, which is everybody, right? And so picking your times. She's now in University of Scotland, so guess what we're spending the winter? The Bahamas. So it's just a different time in life to do it. I did cruising before I was married and had kids. So planning you need to plan life around this stuff a little bit too, or go when you can.
I'd just like to direct this to Allie. What was your outtake on the cruise? Challenging and the good side?
It's interesting. I was 10 when we left and 12 when we came back, and so I was a semi-functioning human, in the sense that I was participatory in all of our activities, but I was also young enough that it has just become a part of my life. And I knew it was a big thing. I know it was a big thing, but it's just an experience that I've had in my life. And I wouldn't do that long again, but I also would not changed the fact that we did that long. The 2 years that we went out instead of just a year, we were able to do so much more and see so much more. And it was just, I think, a better experience for us. And I don't think, there's nothing major that I would have wanted to do differently or not do. And I definitely think it has set me up for being able to do big things in my own life. I saw that we decided to go in the summer of 2012, and then my parents sat down and figured out a plan and executed the plan, and then we went on the boat. And so similarly, I know that if there's something big that I want to do, I can sit down, make a plan, figure it out, and make the thing happen. And I think that's probably my biggest result from our 2 years, and I think that's a pretty good one.
I'm going to call that a parenting win.
So I'm going to take this opportunity and go on a tangent. She was talking about length of time. We went for 2 years. That was the plan. We had a checkpoint 6 months into it. So anybody who's done the migration, we went down the thorny path, which is the hard way. I don't have time to talk about that. But when we were in the Bahamas, we could have easily turned around and turned this into a 9-month or 12-month trip. So we had a formal checkpoint, Kimberly and I, because my goal was to come home and be married still. And so I also went to the Bahamas with a girlfriend and came home alone on a boat.
He came home with the dog.
It was a wonderful cruise, but obviously the interpersonal things. There's all kinds of people in my life I won't even invite to visit me on the boat. There's other people who can stay as long as they want. So being honest with yourself and who you're going with, unless you're going by yourself, about how long you can stay. If a 5-day trip is all as you can do, then you better be happy with that. Or you don't get to go, or you don't get to stay married, in my case. And so you just pick whatever fits into your life, just because we did something. And you think our trip was long. We met Mary, and she'd already been out for 6 years. And in a way, she's still out. She's back at it. And we met people who were on their second trip around the world. And just never stopped. You meet people who, like, all kinds of Europeans, so you think we did big stuff. There's all kinds of, what we did in a lot of ways was breadth in the length of it, but isn't as technical as there is out there by any stretch of this imagination.
You had some long passages. Did you bring on additional crew for those?
No, and we actually didn't have very many long passages. The longest we did was 56 hours. And so what we did is we island hopped. And so we went from Florida to the Bahamas, and there's a lot of Bahamas. And then we went to Turks and Caicos. And then we went to Dominican Republic, so to Hispaniola. Then we went to Puerto Rico. And so there was a lot of nighttime sailing. So what we did, you had to embrace the night, so you could leave in the daytime, but more importantly, arrive in a new place in the daytime. So there was a lot of 12 and 18 and 20-hour jumps. Most of them were kept to that. And the only reason we did that one was at the very end when and I did that on purpose because I didn't think our crew, and this boat, the boat we bought, most people won't sail it across like to Europe. There's a few that have, but it's really not, in my opinion, made for that. And so we didn't do the quick way is to jump from here to Bermuda and from Bermuda to Virgin Islands or something like that. So we didn't do any of that. So no, we didn't take any crew. Allie, when she was basically not a watchstander. And so the two of Kimberly and I did it. But because we kept it to short periods of time, we managed it just fine. That 56-hour cruise, Allie actually stood some watches for us. Daytime ones, just, you pick who can do what. I could talk to you about how we did it and the challenges. What we did was the hard way, though. We went against the current, so we went against the wind. As one cruiser we met, we told him what we were doing. He goes, "You're going against God." And he was right.
He was absolutely correct.
Hello? Okay. Having this experience must have been incredible, but coming home from it had to have been incredibly isolating because really who can relate back in your neighborhood, right? So coming home, how did you find your people, your community again in that shift, that transition to kind of assimilate?
That's a great question. And I was extremely lucky. So we live in Mattapoisett. And anytime someone found out about our trip, oh, do you know the Johns? Do you know the Beams? Those are the two other families that have done something similar. A little different, each one of us did it, something that was tailored for our family. However, the Beams had 3 girls, and their girls were 11, 13, and 15, I believe, when they left. They went for a 9-month trip, so it was a much shorter trip, but similar ages. They were a year and more ahead of Allie in school, so we'd never come across them as peers within our town. However, we were introduced when they got home before we left, and they loaned us a big, giant stack of cruising guides, wonderful books. Had all of Jenny's notes written in them throughout the 2 years that we were out. So I really felt like I had met Jenny and knew Jenny. And when we came back, I made an arrangement to go for a walk with her and take the books back to her that she had loaned us. And we decided after that first walk that we needed to do that every week, because you're absolutely right. It's a very unusual circumstance. Allie, in fact, didn't want any people at the junior high to know what she had done. She just wanted to come back, and you think about where you are in the junior high stage and you want to fit in. Well, that doesn't fit in very well. So she just chose to get back on board with what 12 and 13 and 14-year-olds were doing. I think I explained that my husband tried to go back and fit in technical consulting, and that didn't go very well either. And he is a much happier human as part of the fishing community. We're outside every day.
It's hard, though. Prepare yourself for a shock, or maybe you've experienced it, but just prepare yourself for a shock, and it's not a lot of fun coming back. It's a pretty universal thing. There's a few people who are done with the cruise, but when you really get into it, and then, even when it was time to come back, all kinds of reasons we needed to, besides we needed to work, the money was out. It's not the most pleasant experience.
And
We
even
have
when
time for one last question.
I was just saying, even when he was saying, if you're not ready for it to be, even if you're ready for the trip to be done, it's still an experience coming back. And people that we met out cruising warned us about it, and you can't be warned enough. It's just a completely unexpected hurdle that you have to just figure out how to jump.
So we have, do we have somebody we have one final question. Here we go, up here.
All right. Thinking back to planning, if there was one aspect of planning that you wish you never would had to do, and one that you would do time and time again, what are those two?
I'd pick the homeschool. The word curriculum scared me for nearly a year. Once we got into it, it was kind of very organic. We ended up studying whales because we saw whales when we were out there, and we went through their breeding grounds. And so it became a very organic thing where you look around you and there's education everywhere you look. But I was kind of hung up on what should my 5th grader know? And Andrea's out here in the audience. There she is. Andrea was my homeschool goddess who just helped demystify it all for me. So the homeschool I would probably give up. What would you give up in the planning stages, hon?
I brought too many tools and spare parts and stuff.
And yet we had no heat exchanger when we wanted it.
Well, that's just part of the deal. It brought too much stuff. Everybody brings too much stuff. You need 2 pair of shorts and about 10 T-shirts. And
yes.
And that's all you wear, in a bathing suit and a towel.
So I think right now it's about 7 o'clock. There's a light reception out in the Jacobs Family Gallery. There is a cash bar out there as well. My husband, Allie, and I will certainly be out and about and would love to answer any more questions. If you are interested, our book is for sale, and it is available at the front desk is where you go to pay for it. I find it a little crazy, this being my book, that people want me to actually sign it. I'm happy to. I'm still going to say if I'm dreaming, don't wake me up. I'm really having fun. And then also, if you visit the table, if you are interested in the audiobook, I have to figure out how to record it and how to produce it, but I will do that. And once it is available, anyone who leaves their email with me and becomes part of the mailing list, I will provide it to you at no cost. So feel free to visit the table and leave your email address. And thank you, thank you, thank you.